Lord, I mean, we're still, I think Matt and I are still trying to figure out how we want to cover 24 presidential election.
As little as possible.
Except
Trump. Except Trump, basically.
Except for when Trump says something very funny. Because it's like, it's one of these things. It's just like, despite the way it's going to get framed, democracy in crisis again. Two factions really willing to sort of bend over backwards for the same constituency, that is the rich, and the rest of us sort of caught up in the crosshairs. And a lot of people are going to get really worked up one way or the other. Predominantly think people around here about sort of demanding people sort of line up behind Biden, who has done a shitty job as president, inherited a standard that was incredibly low. Don't be Donald Trump again. And ran with it. I mean, you're going to get those long threads like, oh, look at this that Joe Biden did. Look at that Joe Biden did. Like liberals love to do, right? Because they do have this kind of debate nerd fixation with politics, particularly presidential politics. And I'm sorry, like, call me simple-minded. I'll just tell you this. You can talk about IRA. You could talk about the American Rescue Plan. You can talk about this or that. Ask somebody what their standard of life has been in the past 4 years. Ask them, has it gotten better or gotten worse? And that's what people are going to remember, right?
Did you see the article? I think, I think David Dayen responded to it in the Prospect. I'm not sure if it was in Mother Jones or where, but two guys basically saying, this is the end of deliverism. We've tried things. We tried giving things to the public and it failed. And they're mentioning Obamacare was an example. And look, like, I think people who got healthcare, the 5% of people that went from 85% to 90%, great. That's great to do it. Those premiums went through the fucking roof because we tried to use a mechanism where we try to get profiteers that should not be anywhere near the fucking health system to do it. And so it's fundamentally a fucking failure. And there's no momentum to go to single payer or a public option like people were saying back at the time. It's a fucking failure. So
there's the public option that Biden, because remember, the healthcare was obviously a big factor in 2020. You got all these kind of like debate nerd liberals out there who are like, well, Bernie wants this plan. Yeah, I probably prefer Bernie's plan. But Biden also says we're going to have a public option, right? That's not even on the table. I mean, when was the last time that like got seriously brought up or pushed for? I mean, no. I mean, look, and like, the thing is, it's like, obviously, like, for example, like here in Texas and right-wing states across the country, the right has waged war on Obamacare, right? And has effectively made it worse in certain states. Like in Texas, it's a nightmare, right? There's the cliff, the Obamacare cliff, where like you don't qualify for Medicaid, and you don't get enough subsidy because your income's too low to really afford healthcare. I'm one of those people, I make like $30,000 a year, right? Like I'm one of those people who's like on that cliff, constantly riding that. I'm not unlike the vast majority of Texans, by the way, who are, constantly sort of dealing with this. So like, what is people's real experience with this? Is like, well, this was a massive giveaway for the insurance industry. A lot of people aren't getting the coverage that they need. And if you have the coverage, you still can't go to the doctor. Right, because like you have like a $10,000 premium, like not premium, copay, right? You have to reach that level of spending before the insurance even really kicks in the first place, right? So a lot of people treat these things with suspicion, right? And like you could say, well, you're wrong about this, and maybe the Democrat, the Republicans are causing it, right? And it's like, fine. What does that mean? What does that matter to people? Like, this is a system that is not working, right? And if the idea is in politics, right, that the Republicans are just automatically going to try to undermine and undo programs like this, why do those programs? Like unless you like have a platform or something that would actually make Republican governance in like a significant portion of American states irrelevant, right? Then like, what are you talking about? Like, of course it's going to be interpreted and be cut back, and all these things are going to happen, right? So constantly is the blaming of the uneducated voters, right? And blah, blah, blah. No, these systems don't work. And you can make arguments as to why they don't work. Yeah, the insurance industries are fucked, right? The Republicans are trying to undermine them. That is the political reality of the country that we're in, right? And like in the ideal world where Bernie Sanders is president, let's say, any Bernie Sanders plan would have to be strong enough to withstand right-wing attacks and attacks from the capitalist class. So this constant like, oh, poor us, we're so weak. You know, not to get into it, Matt, but people were getting really mad at the segment you did last week on Wisconsin, saying like, oh, well, the Republicans, they are doing all these awful things. That is political reality in America. You have no solution for this. You just don't. And you think that you can sit on this as an excuse forever. People aren't buying it. And unfortunately, because I do think that like another Trump presidency would be disastrous for the country. And this new poll shows that this strategy of Joe Biden and the National Democratic Party, that we're not Trump, isn't delivering at the polls. So NBC News did a poll. Democrats warn party the threat of Trump winning in 2024 is very real. A new NBC News poll released Sunday showed Biden with a relatively narrow 49 to 45% lead over Donald Trump, who, by the way, is indicted and is facing massive scandals, right? That doesn't seem to have moved the needle in the way that some people sort of expected it to. And you can complain about it, but that's the reality. That difference falls within the survey's margin of error and is far lower than the 10 percentage point edge Joe Biden held in NBC's last poll before the 2020 election. The new survey shows DeSantis, who is less known than Trump, tied with Biden at 47% each, right? So not only is there a threat of a Trump victory, there's also a very reasonable threat of a potential DeSantis victory, which is really disastrous. And we can talk maybe about the primary fields in a second. But like, this is not for all the bloviating and all the nonsense that we're getting, like the lines that are being drawn about, oh, you know, people are getting mad at Bree for tweeting out something recently where she says you don't have to vote for Joe Biden, right? And people are like, wow, she's wrong, and this is election. People are literally saying like this is like voter suppression and things like that, right? And like not going hard on like I think we've taken a pretty neutral position as the left right here, that like it just doesn't seem that we have the viable options. I've said very clearly that I think Cornel West is the person who I think is closest to me politically, definitely the person that I'll most likely be voting for, but very clear at this moment that there is not like an electoral vehicle that's available for the left, right? And the focus of the left should be about building up some kind of institution, an organization that could actually deliver, for example, threats of voting third party or not voting, or a promise of saying, oh, we'll line up behind Biden to stop a Trump presidency, right? We don't have that. So I think the left should be more focused on building that instead of like constantly litigating these fights. But on the other side, their entire strategy is basically Jill Stein cost us the 2016 election. Joe Biden is great. Trump is dangerous. Which, look, you can make that point to your friends. You can tweet about it. You can talk about it. It's not going to deliver you an election. And we are playing with people's lives and the future of this country, right? And the weakness of the Democratic Party is the Democratic Party's fault. And the fact that like, the reality that like these people are now blaming the critics, the people who have been rightfully pointing out how this is not delivering, as the reason for Joe Biden's weakness is asinine. Because look, the vast majority of people who maybe are thinking, oh, maybe Trump would be good again or whatever, they're not taking that position because people have been criticizing Joe Biden's domestic policy because people on the left have been criticizing Joe Biden. They're attracted to that because their life has gotten worse in the past few years. You can litigate.
Oh yeah. Speaking of like the whole Obamacare thing, it just so happens that life expectancy has been going down.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's the front runner race. I want to look really fast at the GOP before we get to some very exciting announcements from some of the alternatives, Matt.
Can't wait.
GOP voters' first choice for the 2024 Republican primary. If the Republican primary for president were being held today, which one of the following candidates would you favor as a first choice? And it's Trump. And in fact, Trump's stronger than Trump even was in April.
DeSantis, DeSantis less strong, Pence stronger. Who's that fourth there?
Nikki Haley.
Haley a little bit stronger too, but
Yeah, I mean,
not too significantly.
Nikki Haley hanging out around 4% though, right?
Christie joined at
The
5.
5, I would love to. We should get a Chris Christie voter on the show. That's the one Republican surrogate I would get on the show. I'd love to hear the Chris
We're gonna need to
Christie vote.
canvas for a fucking while. I guess 5% there must be out there. I guess we got to go to the like suburbs and look for who has like a BMW.
100%. But look, it's looking, who knows? But like the idea that the Trump indictment and his legal scandals were going to break him doesn't look like it's the reality. So, what is the Democratic strategy right now? I mean, basically, it's returning to an old playbook of trying to corral probably one of the more marginal. Not trying to say this to be insulting to us, but like one of the more marginal political groups in this country, which are like progressives who might potentially vote third party in an election. Like that's who they're fixating on instead of trying to make a pitch as to what they'll do better, maybe delivering for people in the meantime. I can't tell folks how devastating it is going to be for Joe Biden once people are starting to be forced to paying back those student loan
Yes.
in the next couple of months. I
Oh
mean,
my God. Yeah, exactly.
insane. It is political suicide from the Democratic Party. It is dangerous what they're doing. And I'm just not going to accept this framing of this argument anymore. The responsibility to be able to show that you are more effective and like the lesser of two evils is 100% on this party, and not on activists and people who are trying to challenge and critique it.
Maybe it's because I come from farmers, but like this cultivation as the metaphor for what democracy requires is not just like going past a fucking field that's been, denuded of any nutrients for like ever and throwing a seed at it and be like, oh, it fucking failed to grow. Like and the student loan thing is the perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
You are raising the earth with that.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to, and like, right. And then you like want to throw a fucking sunflower and be like, oh yeah, like we tried with this thing. Like, and it's like, and also there's an allergy to even touting their achievements. Like we're going to hear, I haven't looked into it too deeply, but some unions at least have now got sick days thanks to Bernie Sanders, apparently. And how many that is, like, it's unclear to me, but like I saw certain Biden supporters taking a victory lap about that. And I'm sorry, like you need to do a lot more of that to build trust because you just sacrificed trust in a high profile way recently. Okay, you repair the damage for which unions? I am all for like Bernie Sanders and that support helping get sick days 6 months late, right? But let's be serious about what this means and not use it because that's what happens every time. Like a Democratic like media or like consultant person sees one of these, like, oh, we got you now. What you're gonna come back for us for more? Your hands are out even more, and like this is the problem. And I talked about this with Sam, like who's been saying on Majority Report, like we need to get people to take care of or care about the courts. And actually, there's a problem with that because the extent that Democratic voters care about the courts and show up to it, the Democrats realize, oh, we can actually trim our sails everywhere else.
Yeah.
We got this Roe energy behind us. Who gives a fuck about student loans? Right. And they absolutely, you can tell that that's the way that they use those things.
100%. I mean, this is classic. I mean, look, we're like in Texas, like we're probably looking at another, failed attempt to maybe come at Cruz, right? It's going to make a lot of money for Democratic Party consultants. There's just like very little interest in like building up something. Like Roe is another example. Look, we're at the 1-year anniversary of that. I mean, incredibly devastating. And like the stories you hear from people who are living in dystopias like my home state, they should be horrifying. But where is this translated into politics? I mean, in New York, they did like a pro-abortion rally, and one of the slogans and signs that they were flying was "Fuck Texas," right? Which is basically as far as that I think is going to deliver for the Democratic Party, right? In places where like it's already like the Democratic Party's already strong and control, it might be used to whip up support, but they're safe, right? Where is the national support at this point for all of these people who are dealing with this dystopia? It's gone. The congressional Democrats are doing very little on it. Joe Biden, will give a speech and talk about, we haven't forgotten about you, but it's the reality there. They've given up.
And it's pretty sick for them to get on this. Oh, I'm going to own Marjorie Taylor Greene about PPP loans.
Yeah.
And then what? Like,
And then what? Well, Matt, I'm talking about money and loans. At least there's a voice of sanity and a challenge to Joe Biden and the corrupt Democratic Party. RFK has a huge announcement about how we're going to deliver us into the future.
I didn't know what it is. Yeah.
Okay. I'm proud to make an historic announcement. Our campaign will be the first presidential campaign in history to accept Bitcoin donations through the Lightning Network. As president, I will make sure that your right to hold and use Bitcoin is inviolable.
Well, I want to keep it going, but amazing and so fucking stupid.
It's on
Anyone who gets on the Bitcoin train late is like, I don't know, like there's a level of hilarity to it for me.
Yeah,
you will do anything at that point.
Yeah, I mean it's very.
And this is a guy who was, he's going on about? Was it Wi-Fi with Joe Rogan recently?
Yeah, even Rogan's like, the blood-brain barrier. Like, okay, man. Yeah, and also there's an interesting article. Not that interesting. It's kind of weird, but it was his takedown of RFK. It had some weird bits about him using withholding, conditioning on his dogs and stuff like that. But there's a part where he implied that his voice is that way because of a vaccine injury. Oh, that is not true. That is not the story he's been telling. Billy Baldwin, and I can just say, I've also heard this. Robert Kennedy told me, not this exact thing, but this is what Billy Baldwin says, and this coheres with what I've heard as the actual source for that vocal thing. Is Robert Kennedy Jr. told me on several occasions that he contracted hepatitis C from my father-in-law, John Phillips, when he shared needles shooting heroin back together in the 70s. That's actually the reason. But anyway, Bitcoin, the Bitcoin stuff, like there is a concerted project behind that is like the right-wing thing. So this is on brand again for Bobby Kennedy and his free market sort of stuff. RFK. Like, what did I call
Bobby?
He's a Bobby, Bobby Jr. Yeah, he.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Right, like but he's just, it's just depressing that, like this is, and Mark Ames had a tweet like this, like Bernie capitulating, like as he did. There hasn't been any sort of talk about Medicare for all. That this is a real nail in the coffin, that the supposed health Democrat is this not a Medicare for all supporter, this individualistic bullshit kind of free market guy. And the actual criticisms isn't really of pharma as much as it is like public health in general.
This is a capitalist. Somebody said that multiple times. I don't know why people continue to associate him with more radical politics. And you just said it. I was just going to share this Jeffrey St. Clair, even though he seems to not like me anymore. After the crushing of the Jackson and Sanders campaigns, we all know that the Democratic Party primaries are rigged to ensure the triumph of a centrist candidate. HRC and Obama were largely indistinguishable at policy level. So what is the function of RFK Jr.'s doomed campaign? One result seems certain. His movement seems destined to kill off one of the lasting legacies of the Sanders campaign, single payer. RFK's attack on public health as a totalitarian plot are fatal to the prospects for a government-run national healthcare system at the very moment when it's needed most. I mean, I agree completely. So dark, super dark. And, we talked about, the other argument that people make for RFK is this foreign policy, somebody who rolled over almost immediately on pressure to maintain the apartheid state in Israel. So I don't know what you're doing.
He's like a 2006 era Zionist when it comes to like Israel's place in the world. Like,
so a truly bizarre campaign, and I think I'm trying not to be like depressing about these things, but like, you know, I think it's also, we have to be clear-eyed. I think that like the Bernie campaign spoke to a lot of people, and I think we should be confident in that thing's ability. But I mean, I think the RFK thing just shows that like though there is like a swath of the Democratic Party primary voters who could be pulled in a few different directions, and it's a sad thing to realize that the groundwork wasn't done around the Sanders campaign to sort of cement some of those positions and commitments within that group of people who like probably are not politically organized. You know, they're probably not people who are tuning into these programs or political media as much in general, or at least the ones that they are probably are the more mainstream alternative things like Rogan, etc. And yeah, I mean, a very frustrating. I don't want to say wasted, but like a very frustrating result of, you know, some very promising movements in American politics.
Closing of a window, it looks like.
Yeah.